All right, welcome again, everyone. And we are now going to start our DFAP, Discrimination Financial Assistance Program food forum. And I just want to start with some housekeeping and technical considerations. Please keep your microphone on mute. If joining on the computer, please type your questions in the chat and we will be monitoring the chat. I want to give thanks to our collaborators and hosts, the Danley Point team, and we also want to acknowledge the other cooperators for the DFAP program here in Florida. We have the Rural Coalition, and the Rural Coalition is one of the most diverse of all rural organizations and is an alliance of farmers, farm workers, indigenous, immigrant, and working people from throughout the Northern Hemisphere who work to develop capacities of rural organizations and people to secure systemic change in order to protect and sustain their land and communities. Founded in 1978, the Rural Coalition has worked for 45 years to advance the interests of the historically underserved producers and rural communities that the coalition serves. Another one of the cooperators and partners is the Land Loss Prevention Project, and the Land Loss Prevention Project was founded in 1982 by the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers to curtail the epidemic losses of Black-owned land in North Carolina. Land Loss Prevention Project was incorporated in the state of North Carolina in 1983. The organization broadened its mission in 1993 to provide legal support and assistance to all financially distressed and limited resource farmers and landowners in North Carolina. Land Loss Prevention Project's advocacy for financial distressed and limited resource farmers involves action in three separate arenas: litigation, public policy, and promoting sustainable agriculture and the environment. Another cooperator that we have here in Florida is the Windsor Group, founded in 2007. The Windsor Group LLC provides professional services and business solutions to federal government agencies. Their aim is to first understand the mission and the challenges facing organizations, and then work diligently to provide the requisite ideas, solutions, and resources to address the client's needs and challenges identified. They deliver results based on management and commitment to perform excellence, anchored in the principles of customer care, trust, and strong client relationships, with the goal of achieving the optimal success of their clients. And then last but not least, I will give a brief description about the Florida Food Policy Council, who hosts these food forums throughout the year on different topics. And the Florida Food Policy Council creates opportunities to collaborate, celebrate, and advance equitable food policies to improve quality of life. The Florida Food Policy Council builds a culture of health rooted in equality through food justice. By connecting the community to their food and the food system, the Florida Food Policy Council can place the well-being of Floridians at the center of every aspect of life. The Florida Food Policy Council is a grassroots organization based in community engagement and action. Thank you. And this is one of many Florida Food Policy Council food forums that has explored the topic of the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program for the USDA, otherwise known as DFAP. So today, we have our presenters from FLAG, which is the Farmers Legal Action Group. And I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everyone. And I'm going to give you a little description about FLAG. The Farmers Legal Action Group is a nonprofit law center founded in response to the farm credit crisis of the 1980s, aiming to provide legal services and support to family farmers, aiming to provide legal services and support to family farmers. Initially formed by attorneys James Massey, Lynn Hayes, and Sarah Vogel, and the late Dale Reisman, FLAG gained prominence by representing 230,000 farmers in Coleman versus Lang, successfully challenging illegal procedures used by the Farmers Home Administration. The organization was financially supported by Farm Aid, initiated by Willie Nelson, and has since continued its mission to help family farmers navigate legal challenges, gain congressional recognition, and has gained congressional recognition for its expertise in federal issues affecting farmers. In today's complex agricultural landscape, FLAG remains a crucial resource for family farmers, countering the legal power held by federal agencies, bankers, processors, and marketers. And today we have with us Stephen Carpenter, and I'll read a brief bio on Stephen Carpenter. He is the Deputy Director and Senior Staff Attorney at FLAG. He graduated from Drury College and Stanford Law School. His work at FLAG has focused on various issues, including discrimination in agricultural lending, debtor credit matters, disaster assistance, federal farm programs, sustainable agriculture, and the challenges faced by farmers in contracting for livestock production. With a wealth of experience, Stephen has played key roles in significant cases, such as the Pickford case, and currently serves as the court-appointed ombudsman for the Black farmers discrimination case. He's conducted numerous trainings, authored many publications, and contributed to the law review articles showcasing his commitment to advancing agricultural law. Additionally, Stephen is actively involved in academic advisory committees and serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. And along with Stephen, and I apologize, but I did not have a bio, is Lindsay. And so she's going to present with him as well. And Lindsay, if you can give a brief introduction before you share your slides as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stephen and Lindsay and thank them so much for coming and covering this important topic for farmers.
Thanks, Erica. Again, my name is Stephen. My colleague Lindsay is with me. We're lawyers, so we're going to talk about the people tend to call it DFAP, the USDA Discrimination Financial Assistance Program, trying to really pull apart the rules as they are. And so instead of saying DFAP or the long name, we'll probably often just refer to this as the program, but this is the program that we mean. And our goal here is to give a really short description of the basics of the program. I'm going to talk about some of the basics. Lindsay's going to talk about the application itself. We're going to be pretty brief here, just so people can get a basic idea of what's going on. One of our goals as well is to make sure that you understand that you can get some assistance in this program. So we'll be talking about that assistance. There's some materials that Lindsay and I, that have written. Some are kind of short and some are kind of long to help you understand how this program works. So we are planning to have time for questions here. And so we're going to jump right in. I'm going to start, and as I say, this is a pretty brief little snapshot of what this program is like. There'll be plenty of time to ask questions afterwards, and our contact information will be in the chat, and we are happy to answer questions later as they pop up. And so with that, it's really a pleasure to be here. This is an important program, and it's kind of about time that Congress did something like this, and we're working really hard to make sure that it actually does what it's supposed to do, which is to assist people who have experienced discrimination in USDA farm loan programs. So let's get started. To program, and when we say program, we mean that it's something that Congress created. And so it's not a part of a lawsuit. And so you may have heard of other lawsuits. So this is a program that Congress created. And in this program, if you have experienced discrimination by USDA trying to get a farm loan from USDA, there's a decent chance that you're going to be eligible to receive some financial assistance. One of the things that we want to emphasize right off the top and sort of keep in mind is that there's a deadline for this program. That deadline is January 13th of next year, 2024. There was an earlier deadline, but it got extended. We should not count on another extension. And one of the things that's about to become clear here is that though we think this is a good program, really important program, it's not easy to navigate. And so there's an application, and this is not something that you can do overnight or in a few hours. So we really urge you to plan ahead, think through how you're going to approach this application if you think that you're eligible, and please use some assistance. There is no cost to apply. You could use a lawyer and hire a lawyer if you want to, but you don't have to. And there is assistance out there. The people that we work with, the Rural Coalition and others that you have and will hear about, none of those folks are going to charge you. So if people start saying, oh, I can promise you money, but it's going to cost a few $100, be very, very careful. Because again, there's no charge for this program, and there is assistance out there that doesn't cost money. So I'll say one more time, and Lindsay and I at FLAG have created a 4-page summary of this program that you can find on our website. And we also did a beastly long, detailed account of this program that's also on our website. And the goal with that is to help you answer questions that you come across. So let's talk about eligibility. We're going to kind of go fast here. So eligibility for this is really comes in 2 ways. One is that you personally experience discrimination by USDA when you tried to get a loan with a USDA farm loan program. And that discrimination needs to have taken place before January 1st of 2021. Interestingly, there's no start time for the program. That is to say, if you're, a bit older than some, and you have experienced discrimination way back, you are just as eligible as anybody else. It's important to note, though, that there is no such thing as lawyers would call it, of an estate claim. That is to say, for almost everyone involved, you have to be alive to apply for this program. Your estate, there can be no estate claims, there can be no heirs that file a claim for somebody who experienced discrimination and is now passed, with a tiny exception that I'm about to explain. So let's repeat. You have to have, in general, you need to have experienced the discrimination yourself. It has to be with USDA farm loan programs. Go in and try to get an operating loan or buy land. It's for direct loans. That is to say, USDA was about to be the lender, not a bank, unless if it was what's called a guaranteed loan, and it was USDA that did the discrimination itself. So we're talking about discrimination. It can go way back, but it needs to be discrimination that you experienced sometime before January 1, 2021. You walked in, for example, and they told you, well, we don't really make loans to women. They would rarely be that blunt, but that's the sort of thing that we're talking about. There's a second group that's much smaller of people that can be eligible, and that's folks that have at the moment a loan that they're paying on, but they got that loan. Lawyers would call it an assignment or an assumption. So what happened here is there's someone that tried to get a loan at USDA, did get a loan at USDA, but there was discrimination against them. And they ended up either what's, again, lawyers call assigning that loan to another person. That means you're the other person. That means you now are making the payments on a loan that was made to somebody else. And that somebody else experienced discrimination. So if it sounds a little confusing, it kind of is. But what it means is that this is the only way that you can apply for this program if you are not the person who experienced this discrimination. In this little sliver of an exception to the rule, it can be somebody else, they experienced discrimination, and then they pass the loan and probably, some of the farm onto you. They experienced the discrimination, you now hold that loan, you have the right to file in this program. If you got questions about that, we spent a lot of time talking about how that rule actually works in our guide. So, eligibility. In addition, what in the world does the discrimination mean in this program? And when you boil it all down, what discrimination means is that you were treated differently and wrongly based on an improper reason. And that reason can be some of the things that we're really familiar with: race, color, sex, gender. It can also be, though, disability, national identity, which is, when people say ethnicity, they, basically the way the law works, that's national origin. So if you're Hispanic or Latino, and when you look at our guide, you can see that it's a pretty broad definition of the folks that are covered, and so that USDA can't discriminate against them, and if they do, you can participate in this program. So, the definitions of the way we think about discrimination have changed in this country, and this program kind of rolls with that. So if you're binary and you're discriminated on that basis, you may well have a claim in this program. So if you're and what does it mean to be treated differently? If USDA doesn't follow its own rules when they dealt with you, or if they treated you worse and differently than everybody else, that's what we mean by discrimination. So if you walk in and you're trying to get a farm loan in your community, and you're not white, but you see that all the other white farmers seem to get loan applications right away and get them looked at right away, but they won't even give you one, that's discrimination. They're treating you differently on the basis of something that's illegal. And so that's discrimination. I'm just going to give a little bit about the application, and we write more about this in our guide, but I really want to emphasize that when you do this application, and Lindsay's going to talk about it more, you really need to tell the story of what happened to you. You need to really describe the farm that you were trying to farm or were farming. The discrimination took place. It's no fun to go through and describe this stuff, but it's really important for this program to explain what happened to you. And then you need to explain how the discrimination harmed you economically. And this is where the rubber hits the road with this program, in the sense that you need to tell your story in your own words, the way that it affected you. And the more details, really, the better. Sometimes you're going to be asked in this application to use documents. You can see that in the application. There's help out there trying to decide what documents to use. All we want to say now is, don't cut this application short. Give the details. If you have some records, use them. The details really help you. There's a couple of other questions that we wanted to quickly bounce through. One question that people have sometimes is, Well, I was involved in one of the older discrimination lawsuits. You may have heard of Pigford. You may have heard of Keepseagle. You know, that's for Black farmers and for Native American farmers. The short answer to the question is that you can apply for this program even if you participated in one of these older lawsuits. And also, you can apply in this program if you didn't. In other words, it doesn't matter in terms of your eligibility. In fact, if you participated in one of these old lawsuits, that can help prove your case in this program. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The last thing I want to say is there are no appeals here. That is to say, once you get this application in and complete, that's it. You know, you're not going to have another shot at this. So it's really important to tell your full story. It can be kind of complicated to file your application. USDA wants you to send it in electronically, but you can send it in hard copy. You get to choose. The good thing about the assistance out there available is that there are people who are really expert in getting your application filed correctly. So the last thing I really emphasize is assistance is out there. I know this is a pretty short version of how this whole program works. If you experience discrimination before January 1 of 2021, you may well have a good shot at getting some financial assistance here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay, my colleague, who's going to offer introduction to herself, and she's going to give you a peek at what this application looks like. And you kind of want to hide your eyes at first. It's long, but it's doable. And so, Lindsay, demystify the application, please.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, hello, everyone. As Stephen said, my name is Lindsay Keene. I have worked with Stephen at the Farmers Legal Action Group since about 2017. And my goal in just a few minutes is going to be to at least give you a sense of what this application looks like. And partly why we think that is so important is that it is a long application. There's no denying that. There's no getting around it. If you were to print this application off, it would be 40 pages. And that can be understandably overwhelming and intimidating. And so I just want to kind of scroll through a couple sections that I think are especially important to note, and also give you a sense of how it's structured so that if and when you do decide to apply for the program, you're not kind of going in blind, so to speak. So this is what you're looking at now, hopefully on the screen, is the first page of the application. As you can see, it has a step 1 about you. And I think the first thing I want to note about this application is that it is divided into 10 steps. And each of these steps kind of has a category, a lot of it based on the information that the program needs to determine if you're eligible. And so, as you can see, this first step is really just getting information on you, the person applying, the person who most likely experienced the discrimination, the person who is wanting to receive a financial payment from this program. There are also steps that will ask you about the discrimination that you suffered, about the economic loss. There's going to be a step that's going to ask for lots of questions about, what was your interaction with USDA's farm loan programs? Did you get a loan? If so, they'll ask for information on that loan. Or did you attempt to get a loan, but you were discriminated against and were denied? There'll be questions on that. And finally, there'll be a step that will ask questions about your farming operation. Did you own the land? Did you lease the land? So one thing, for better or worse, about this application is that it really, and I'll just kind of scroll a little so you can see, it prompts you with lots of questions. And so it does require close reading. But as you go through, there is a big piece of this, I think, and something that can be confusing to some looking at it, is what are the documentation requirements for this program? And to this end, I want to note at the very top, where I'm kind of highlighting now, the application breaks down documents into 2 categories. They're what are called the must documentation, and these are documents that are absolutely required. So if you see that a document is a must document, it means that when you submit your application, you've got to submit that type of documentation in order to be eligible to receive a payment. Now, there are fewer required or must documents in this application, and there are more of what the application terms may documentation. And the may documentation are essentially suggestions for documents that would be helpful and that would likely make your application stronger. And so from our perspective, of course, anytime you see must, do your best. It's important that you find that type of documentation they're asking for. When you see requests for may documentation, if it's something that you can find, that you have, that doesn't, that you have the capacity and time to track down, it is definitely advisable to include it. But I would encourage you not to kind of, stress too much if you can't find the may documents, because it is still possible to be eligible for the program without it. And so as an example on page 2, this is an example of required documentation. So one of the things that you have to provide with this application are 2 forms of identification. And as you can see in this gray box, there's over a dozen types of documents that you could use to support your identification. So you'll just need to pick 2 of them and include them when you submit your application. You'll also notice that this supporting document request, and this is going to be consistent throughout the application, is always in a gray box. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through to give you a sense. Many pages will have on the right-hand side, it's called supporting documentation requests. And it's going to be a gray box, and it's going to label whether the document they're suggesting is a must, meaning you've got to provide it, or a may. So as you look through the application, I think it can be helpful to kind of just scroll through, look at all of those gray sidebars to see the type of documentation that you're going to need to try to track down and kind of compile. And I think that will help you as you go through. So that, as you can see, I'll just do a little more here. It's almost every page of the application is going to have a supporting documentation request. But again, unless it says must, it is optional, but advised if you do have those documents. A couple other things I wanted to note about this application. So, Stephen mentioned earlier that obviously this program is about discrimination. And so there's step 5 of this, and I'll kind of try to scroll there. Step 5 of this application is going to ask about your experience of discrimination. And I think what I want to point out about this is that for some of you, you may have had multiple experiences of discrimination with USDA. And this application does allow you to talk about each of those if you want. The way they term this, and you can see this, I'm on page 23, they say instance number. So let's say over the course of 10 years, you went into USDA on multiple occasions, and you had different experiences of discrimination. You can write about each of those separately. The thing to note is that you're going to want to be sure that you label, the first instance, the second, the third, and then you're going to have to answer several pages of questions about that same instance. So that can be a little confusing, but I just wanted to note, for each experience of discrimination, answer, I think there's about 4 pages where it's going to ask you about what happened. And then just be sure at the top of the page to put in, if you're talking about discrimination instance number 3, you would just put that at the top and answer all the questions about that instance of discrimination. And then, you can go through and do the same for the next. So of course, you do not need more than 1 instance of discrimination. But if you do have, if you did experience multiple moments when USDA discriminated against you, you are absolutely welcome and encouraged to write about all of those. The other thing I wanted to note, and I will try to wrap up soon, it would be easy to talk for a very long time about this application, but step 6 is the step where the application asks about your losses. and this is something Stephen mentioned a moment ago, the application is really focused on your economic losses. And so it will prompt you with questions, did you lose land? Did you lose a home? Did you lose collateral, farm equipment? All of those you can answer. But there's one part where it says, I'm going to scroll down there. It says, do you have any other economic losses not already listed? The reason I point this out is this is one of the sections where if there is economic loss that the application, has not prompted you to talk about, you are welcome to describe that loss. But one thing that you have to provide with your application, and this is on that kind of right gray box, is the calculation that you used to determine the value of that loss. And again, this is because the program seems to be primarily and pretty much exclusively concerned with economic loss. So any economic loss that you suffered, you should include, but just know that if the application doesn't specifically ask you for it, such as, the value of a home that you may have lost, then you're going to need to write out the calculation that you used and do your best to describe why you used that calculation. So the final thing I want to say about this application, and again, please know there are resources and organizations. We are here to help you as you work your way through it. But the final thing to note is that there are only 3 ways to submit your application. As Stephen mentioned, the deadline is January 13th of next year, of 2024. You can submit your application online through an e-filing system. USDA seems to encourage that as the most efficient way, but we all know that many people don't have access to internet or computers, or that may just not work for you. So I also want to be sure you understand that you can deliver a hand-filled out application in person, and you can also mail in a paper copy of the application. And when I'm done speaking, I'll put in some links. For mailing in your application, there are 4 regional offices that you can mail them into. And so I will put a link to that in the chat in just a moment. But I think an important thing on this that has confused some folks is that you cannot email your application. That is not going to be a sufficient way to submit this. So it's e-filing, mailing, kind of good old snail mail, or delivering in person if you happen to live near one of the offices. So I think that is what I have to say. I know the deadline is coming up. This is not a first come, first serve application. So, and you really have one shot at it, as Stephen said, because there's no appeals. So, what that means is you are in no better position if you submit an application tomorrow than if you submit it on January 12th. So we just encourage you to be thorough, to tell the story in the way that reflects what you experienced, to include the documentation that you have, and that when you submit it, that it's kind of the best application that you can do. Because again, they're going to wait till that deadline comes before reviewing all the applications and making the awards. Stephen, did I miss anything? Otherwise, I think that is what I wanted to say on the application.
That's great. I feel like I skipped over one thing that I just wanted to mention, and that is sort of what kind of payments or what level of financial assistance is possible. And so that number is that the most anybody is going to get is $500,000. But most people who get money will likely not get anything close to that. So we are talking about real money out there, although for almost everybody, it's not going to make you whole. It's not going to right the wrong, but it will give you some assistance. And the second thing I wanted to say about that is, there's so much suspicion, and rightly so, of what USDA is doing and what they say they're doing. Here, Congress set aside $2.2 billion that's going to go to this program. So the program is for real. The money is there. The money will go out. So this is not some, weird scam. It's for real. It's got its problems, but it's a real program that we, really want to see work well. So that's something I forgot to say. I think that what we're doing now is taking questions. So we don't have a huge group. So really, people and we have some other experts here with us. So Erica, I think that we're ready to talk about questions that people have.
All right, great. So I will go ahead and bring Cassandra and Ben up, and we'll go from there. So Cassandra and Ben, if you can put your video on, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to come off of mute and ask away.
Can you introduce Ben and have him talk about his experience working with farmers and their applications?
Sure. You want to go ahead, Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. I also saw your question, Cheryl, too, so I could speak to that as well. Yeah, hi, I'm an attorney working with the Land Loss Prevention Project. We're helping a lot of farmers apply by interviewing them and preparing applications and helping them think through the details they need, the documents that they need. It turns out, not surprisingly, most farmers do not keep documents from 40 years ago. There's really, why would you? There's really no need. And farmers that did keep documents might have thrown them away in the past 10 to 20 years. So that's a huge challenge in terms of evidence. Old farming records are not required. They're certainly helpful. So we are, relying a lot on sworn statements from witnesses. That tends to be the most readily available evidence, other than the farmer's own recollection, to which you're, certifying the veracity. So yeah, that's, I'd say so far, it is an onerous process, even for us. We're doing it a lot every day, but it takes us a lot of time. I'd say, going to Stephen's point about details, we'll spend at least an hour and a half to 2 hours interviewing each farmer, because we do want a lot of details, and a lot of farmers are older, so and may not readily remember every detail. So you want to work with each farmer and try to jog their memory, ask a lot of questions, because the more details, the more credible it is, the more vivid the story is, and it gets you further along to showing what exactly happened, why it was discrimination, and how it harmed you. So that's briefly, where I'm at. Cheryl, to your question about technical assistance providers helping farmers with e-filing and, creating a profile that multiple farmers can file under, that's certainly what I'm doing. For every farmer that I'm helping, I'm filling out the portal. I'm going into the portal and filling out the application for them. Then I'm sending a draft PDF of that application to the farmer, usually in hard copy. And at that point, unless you're in person, the portal does not allow you to sign for someone else unless they're sitting there with you. So for every farmer that reviews an application is good with what's written based on their interview and follow-up questions, we have them sign a signature page, which is like the step 10 signature page, and you submit that separately in addition to the online portal submission, which the preparer, which is what we're called the technical assistants, the preparer also has to certify that it's true and accurate. So yeah, one person can file for multiple people online. And certainly farmers do a lot of work on their own that, helps us get there a lot quicker. And we can certainly add our expertise in terms of asking for more detail, asking for documents. It's easy for us to go online and look up deeds and other land records. That tends to be the best place for documents because a lot of land records include, in North Carolina, they're called deeds of trust. In other states, they might be called mortgage documents. And those record loans that farmers received in the past that secure USDA loans. So those sometimes even display the installments for payment. So there are a lot of details there. There's interest rates, years of the loan itself. So that's another, value added of us helping is we can search records online.
So it looks like Lana has a question. Has the program acknowledged the number of applicants received or expected applicants they will receive? So what we know is, speaking very roughly, USDA says they have received about 5,000 applications. And even though USDA really wants you to do that electronically, apparently about half are hard copy documents that people mail. And I think that's just because USDA overestimates, how much people live, in a digital world out in the countryside. I mean, not to be mean, but, they wouldn't think of not having access to regular email. But a lot of farmers, experience a digital divide. So I think they're surprised by the number of hard copies they're getting. The question of how many people will apply in the end, boy, nobody knows. And as we were saying, it's hard, it's not a simple application. So please don't wait to the last second, sure. But so that's my best answer. We got 5,000 in. It's just a guess as to how many people will apply in the end. And your guess your guess, Lana, would be as good as anyone else's, including the Secretary of Agriculture. So, all right. Isn't there another question? Lana also asks, the program's dates were extended from October to January. Has there been an expected date of payouts of program funds? Yes. So as Lana points out, there was an extension of the deadline. Originally, it was going to be in October. Now it's moved to January. When the deadline was October, the USDA talked about making the payments. They even talked a little bit about toward the end of the year, and then it got moved to early next year. And I hear, I think the short answer is nobody really knows, but I am quite sure they want to get the payments out, roughly mid-year, late spring. But you just got to remember things happen, and but there is no sort of official, oh yes, it'll all be done by this date. They tell us they're making progress.
I'll take this next question from Miss Kelly Jackson. Just ask how we contact. So I'll let the other organizations speak to this as well. There are multiple ways. So, you can call me personally. I have an office phone. I'll enter it in the chat, but it's 919-886-4496. There's also an online form that we share with Rural Co. and a number of other cooperators, and that's 22007help.com. which is a private resource funded by the nonprofits that are cooperating on this. And I'm putting that in the chat as well. And there's a form on that website that you can fill out, and we will get that information and contact you. Let me just make sure I entered it right. Yeah. So that's two ways. Oh, those aren't going in the chat. Hold on. Let me change that. There we go. So those are in the chat now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We do have someone from the Danley Point team, Cassandra Brown. So I'm going to ask her to give a brief introduction and talk for a minute if she could.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassandra Brown, and I just recently joined the Danley Point team. I do have a background in public health. I have a master's in public health, and I also have a law degree. And I'm excited to be here providing technical assistance and helping farmers complete the application, going over the applications. And I do lots of community work. I've worked with the Florida Farm Workers Association as a fellow in the past. Right now, I do a lot of work in the community around empowering our communities, civic engagement, helping people understand how important it is to be involved and at the table for these important conversations. So I'm excited to be here. We do have a weekly Tuesday night call where farmers can tune in to get questions answered, or if they have questions that are more specific or, application questions, we'd be happy to assist you on one of our Tuesday night calls at 7 p.m. And the information for that call is in the chat. I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm not sure if there are any more questions in the chat. I'm going to look here to see. And there is plenty of information. Thank you, everyone, so much for sharing the information. If there are no further questions, we're just about at the top of the hour. So I will go ahead and kind of close us out. And again, remember, if you didn't get a question answered here, or you wanted to use one of the farmers' calls or another mode of communication to get your question answered, please look in the chat. There are plenty of resources available here. I just want to go ahead and thank the presenters so much, Lindsay, Stephen, and thank you, Cassandra and Ben, for joining us as well and adding information. We want to really thank Danley Point for bringing this information to the table in Florida and contacting us so that we could have these special edition food forums. We want to thank the Rural Coalition and Land Loss Prevention. And we also would like to thank the Board of Directors for the Florida Food Policy Council, Anthony Oliveri, Stacy Brown, Erica Hall, and Erica Hardison. And we just want to remind people that there was some information dropped in the chat. There's a one-pager, a tri-fold brochure, and there's some information on how you can sign up. Please, everyone, keep in mind that the Florida Food Policy Council is a volunteer-run organization and relies on donations, memberships, and sponsorships. Please consider donating by using the link in the chat or going to our website, www.flpc.org. And I think that's about it. If I forgot anyone, please know that blame it on my head and not my heart. And we appreciate everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day and a better week. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, everyone.